Hello, friends, and welcome once again to our Community Center Development Foundation's mini course. Today, we are talking about the wonder principle, and here it is. When people are given the space and freedom to ask questions and imagine possibilities, the community is better able to discover what it truly cares about and desires to achieve. So last week, we used the metaphor of a seed and focused our attention on the story of DNA inside the seed. We talked about how that unique information and power, when it's activated in a community, can give us the hindsight or past wisdom that we need to help us understand our present situation, but also to motivate us into reimagining our future. And that is what the Wonder Principle is all about. It's about curiosity, possibility, creativity, and imagination. To wonder and to dream is a necessary element of being a human. So I want to show you this video right here of Martin Luther King Jr. I'm sure you've all seen bits of this before.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
So he goes on to talk more and more about all of the dreams, but you probably haven't seen the entire speech. Most of us have just heard those little snippets. But if you actually look at the entire speech, you realize that when you summarize it, the first part of it, oh, here he goes again.
Sorry.
The first part, he describes the past when Black Americans were freed from being slaves. He talks about their marginalized journey of resistance and resilience, and that's the organic principle. Then, second part of his speech, he starts describing his understanding of the present. He's talking about what the time right now is for. It's a time for the promise of democracy, for racial justice, for brotherhood. But he doesn't stop at the present. He gets to the third part, which is what we're talking about today. He talks about a dream. This is the wonder of what could be. He dreams that one day his children will be treated for their character rather than their color. He dreams that one day little Black, white boys and girls will be hand in hand, that they'll be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to climb up for freedom together. He's taking wisdom from the past. He's forming it into his understanding for today, but he doesn't stop there. He's dreaming about something new, and he's developing foresight and a vision for the future of America. So I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to talk a little bit more about what wonder actually means.
Yeah, where does wonder come from? And I want to define it a little bit and think about it from my perspective, what this word really means. And it's actually two different things. And one of them is an action, like a verb, and the other one is a noun. It's like a thing. Okay, so I want to start with the verb. So the action is, I wonder, having that curiosity, asking questions. So you think about your community context. I wonder if we could solve this problem ourselves. I wonder if we work together, what is possible here? Or I wonder if we tried this in a different way. I wonder if I asked that person. So it's having that space to inquire about what might be possible. 5 and 2 network, of course, is built around that question, right? What's in your hands? So what's your 5 loaves and what's your 2 fish? What if you shared them with others? How could you use them in different ways? The problem is that, in my experience, we often don't make space for wonder. And I think about my time living in Asia, in Thailand, and I worked with, a number of different foreign aid workers and missionaries. And I would always encourage them to ask this question of people, of local people. Well, what do you have? What are you passionate about? In other words, stir up their wonder, right? Get that action of wonder happening in their brains and in their minds and in their memories. And most people were reluctant to do it. And I think probably because they had their own solutions in mind already. And often that's what prevents us from moving into wonder. They didn't understand the power of wonder, of curiosity, of inquiring into what is possible. Because when we ask questions, we're really creating space for dreaming and creativity and reimagining what the future could look like. The second aspect is having a sense of wonder. So think of it as a noun, it's a thing. It's not just something we do to wonder about, but something that you have. Often children are described as having a sense of wonder. And maybe as adults, we lose our sense of wonder. Do we still have the ability to be amazed and inspired in a way that a child might? I mean, imagine their face when they see the ocean for the first time, or fireworks going off in the sky. But let's bring it back to the level of community and think about the people that you work with. People need the space not only to ask questions, but to envision something bigger, even a better version of their own community. So now, as a leader, we want you to be thinking about, how do I create those kind of spaces and opportunities? And am I creating an environment where it's possible to have those conversations and people feel an openness to share their feelings? I want to share this quote with you as one of my favorites. Antoine de Saint-Exupéry: if you want to build a ship, don't get people to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. So, in other words, when we give people the space to dream about what's possible, often that is the thing that generates a kind of internal motivation. We're going to look at 6 different catalysts, 6 sort of areas of focus that can activate a sense of wonder. But before we do that, I just want to share a story about a friend of mine, someone that I work closely with in Myanmar. His name's Isaiah, and he lives in a world where dreaming and wondering aren't really appreciated. So for generations, farmers up in the hills of Myanmar have grown rice, and they've grown it the same way, the same kind of rice, and they've never thought of doing it any differently. And Isaiah is a dreamer. You can scroll down to that if you want, Kendra. That slide might be in the wrong place. But he found out about a new kind of rice, and instead of planting it grain by grain, which takes a long time, you flood the field and you throw the rice in. And so not only that, it's a fast growing rice. So they're able to harvest it twice the amount as a traditional rice. So it's higher yield, it's easier to plant, but it has the same taste as what people are used to, and it's more nutritious. And so it was so difficult for him because he had so much resistance to what he was doing, to pushing forward with creative ideas, innovative ideas. But he was successful in it, used the extra time and money to pursue other innovative ideas. And so you can see here in the picture, these farmers who are gathering around, they're very skeptical, right? They don't believe in this because it's high risk, but nonetheless, he encourages them to do it and try it. And so it's an incredible sort of picture of leadership, sort of moving people out into a sense of wonder and possibilities. I want to move on here. Sorry, Kendra, I'm making you bounce around here with the slides, but we're going to talk about the 6 catalysts for activating a sense of wonder. So we're going to get a little bit more particular, pragmatic about what can you do to encourage this sense of wonder. And the first one is to create openness. And you know, one exercise that we do a lot in with 5 and 2 network is mapping. And I love the idea of putting a blank piece of paper down in front of someone and just ask, can you draw a map? What do you see in your village? How would you represent your village or your community? What are the possibilities? And, you know, again, going back to children, you know, my children will often grab a blank piece of paper and they'll start to draw and be creative. But I find that as adults, we're sort of attuned to reading things that have already been written, building off of other people's ideas, carrying out the plans of others. And so we want to find ways to create open spaces for dreaming and discussion. So as a leader, you're taking more of a role of a facilitator, asking meaningful questions and follow-up questions. So we say, what do you have? And then the next obvious question is what? What will you do with it? What are you going to do about it? You know? And so making room for questions and conversations to happen. So creating open spaces is the first, and secondly, creative spaces, spaces for art to happen, even for play, to be outdoors and getting exercise. Why? Because these things enliven the heart, they energize your body, and they open up your group to the possibility of wonder. Open-mindedness is another one. To hear the ideas of other people, even conflicting ideas, things that maybe you're not comfortable with. We have to be open to different ideas to cultivate that sense of wonder. And then, of course, creating blank pages for creativity, for art and imagination to take root. So that's the first one. And I'll turn it over to Daniela.
The second one is to promote curiosity. Have you ever heard the phrase, don't reinvent the wheel? It means don't try something new if it's already been done successfully in the past. But maybe sometimes we do need to reinvent the wheel. Maybe we need to start with that blank piece of paper that Jamie was talking about and start fresh. But how do we help people to become curious about what could be on this paper? Curiosity, as defined, is a strong desire to know or to learn something. So how do we promote this? Well, one way is creating a space for open questioning where ideas can be floated around. Another is to create an atmosphere of uncertainty. There is no right or wrong answer. Right now, we're unresolved. We don't know yet. There is no black and white. There could be a lot of gray. It's a time for exploration, for discovering, and for finding out. My husband is so good at instilling curiosity in my boys. He's always taken the time to pick up that log to see what critters could be underneath, taking an unmarked path to see where it might lead, checking out what might be inside that abandoned building. And because he's asked these questions in his mind and into our kids, he's entertained the uncertain and he's made time for exploration. He has promoted curiosity in my boys. I wonder if we applied and promoted this sense of curiosity in our own community building conversations. One practical way you can do this, and I'm kind of alluding to what we will be talking about in the facilitations course, but one thing we talk about is doing a transect walk of our community. And it's where you take an explorational path across your community, start observing and then recording what you discover, and create a co-created map with your community. And it's all about walking out and just discovering and being curious about what you see along the way. So I'm going to hand it over to Kendra.
All right, building on the first two ingredients for cultivating and activating wonder in our communities, creating a safe space, and then promoting curiosity leads to creativity. That's the natural outflow of these things. When we feel safe to bring our ideas, and then we have the freedom to get curious, creativity is our response. If curiosity is asking questions, creativity is beginning to find the answers. Creativity is where we begin to bring forth all the ideas that are bubbling up inside of us to see movement toward real change happening in our communities. Creativity is where we get to begin to see the potential for a better future come to life. We want to highlight 3 elements of creativity as it pertains to wonder: imagination, incubation, and illumination. Imagination is the first ingredient for creativity. In order to see what is possible for positive change in our communities, we have to be able to imagine that a better future is possible. Imagination is connected to hope and it's connected to courage. And when we have the freedom to get curious and wonder in a safe space about what's possible together, our imagination gets inspired, and that's a key ingredient to being able to bring creative solutions to the table. The second element is incubation. An incubator is it's a tool. It's used to create a safe space, a controlled environment for growth. So if a baby is born prematurely, they'll put that child in an incubator. It's a controlled environment for the growth that's needed for that child before the child's ready to be on its own outside of the controlled environment. In the same way, incubation, letting the ideas simmer and steep in our minds and hearts, is an important part of creativity. Just like if you take a tea bag and put it in water, you want to let it sit so that the flavor can get stronger and the ideas can come to a more full, ready to be spoken and acted upon place in your community development process. And finally, illumination. That word just means if it's dark in a room and you bring a flashlight out, it illuminates. It brings light and allows us to see things that are there. So as community-centered development facilitators in our communities, our role is to shine a light on ideas that our community is already doing, right? There's already things happening. People are passionate about things. Things are happening in your community. How can you shine a light on what's happening in your community? Illumination is also bringing your own ideas to the table, and it's also inviting community members to bring their ideas to the table. So like Daniela just did, another tool in our CCD facilitations course, which is the course after this, we give you tools for fostering creativity in your community. So one of those tools is a vision board. It's just a really fun activity that gets people's ideas going, and it's a cool creative space to do as a group. This is just one little tool. We have a couple of others, and I'm going to pass it over to Jamie for the next one.
Yeah, this next one is just talking about risk and, you know, what goes hand in hand with pursuing a sense of wonder is risk and the potential for failure, right? And resistance is a big part of that, right? And so when we move in this direction, it's kind of fun, but we understand it's also risky, especially if you live in an environment where people may be marginalized and there's poverty. Taking a risk with a new variety of rice, might be a risk to someone's livelihood. And so, that's an important thing to keep in mind. So we need to do it carefully, but at the same time, it's a greater risk to not dream and to not feed that sense of wonder. And I think back to that time with Isaiah in Myanmar, on this rice project that we were doing. And I remember doing this training with these people that you see in the picture. I think it's the next slide, Kendra. And they just laughed at him. There was a lot of laughter in the room, just, kind of thinking about what whether this was really a realistic thing to do. So we need space to push into wonder and curiosity. Finding our way towards big dreams is going to involve some missteps along the way, maybe even getting a little bit lost. And so there is the possibility of failure. And in some ways, we need to almost expect that. And, sometimes you may have heard of a feedback loop. And I think it's something really important in development. And the idea is that you try something, but you're always prepared to feed back the information to the source. In other words, whether you have success or failure, you reassess it and you think about how you can do it better again. And in fact, we're not going to be the best that we can be if we don't fail and get up and try again. And so in 5 and 2 Network, we always want to almost promote failure, or we at least want to promote the idea that let's be vulnerable and real and authentic about the things that we're trying, the things that are working, and of course, the things that are not working, so that we can kind of improve together.
So
Daniela, go ahead.
Yeah, the last one is a little bit different than the other ones. This one, we call it instilling admiration. Author David Brooks wrote this: a person who is looking for beauty is likely to find wonders, while a person looking for threats will find danger. So in other words, when we admire others, look for beauty, we're led to appreciate their work, their character, their ideas, and in turn, we are inspired and enlightened and are likely to find wonders. But opposite to this, when we see threats in others, we're led to compete. And in turn, we become discouraged and judgmental. Admiration shows us a pathway we might not have otherwise seen before. And I was reminded about this in speaking with network member Stella Wankamba in the DR Congo. She told me that one of her greatest challenges in working with kids is to help them dream. It almost felt impossible. And she came to a realization that kids and adults as well need real life, everyday heroes to activate wonder. Heroes who also have weaknesses and failures, but somehow have overcome the odds. Heroes who they can aspire to, who have attained victories despite the barriers they have faced. Admiration becomes this unexpected love for someone else's excellence, which sparks in us a fresh desire to dream, to improve, and to create. And one practical way you can see an outpouring of this is by taking field trips, checking things out. Or how about building up a mentorship type of a program where you people have mentors that they can help build confidence in, or to dream with, to discuss and develop goals with. Those are all just different ideas of how you could promote this sense of admiration. So just to conclude all of these facets, I want to show you this little model here that we call the cycle of learning. It's called the inquiry cycle, and we use this in the education world to help show how learning and development occurs. It starts with curiosity. when we're curious about something and inspires us to explore, leading us to investigate and find out. Maybe think about that transect map. What's going to be on the map? Let's go explore. Then investigate. When we go out on an exploration, we make observations, we gather ideas. Maybe when you're doing the transect walk, everybody has their piece of paper and they're writing everything that they see and all their observations and gathering all their ideas. Next, it's the sorting. We sort out our ideas through discussions and we recognize common themes and collectively form some sort of a conclusion. In the mapping exercise, that means putting everybody's maps together and making maybe one collective map where we agree on all of the important spaces and places. Then it's the fun part. It's creating. Based on all these common themes and conclusions, we take a moment to steep or reflect on what's in front of us and imagine the future. We illuminate opportunities and we see different aha moments. And in the mapping activity, that's all of us standing in front of this community map, and maybe we are thinking, maybe we're praying, maybe we're discussing, but we come to a place where we agree on what should we do here? And now it's time to try things out and experiment. We've reached a consensus and we want to make our dreams action. And lastly, we do the activity, we come together for reflection, and we evaluate what went well and where we can improve. And guess what happens? We start to become curious again. It's the wonder thing again. And now we go round and round and round, and we start to learn and we start to develop. So I'm going to hand it over to Jamie to just finish us off here.
Yeah, so just in conclusion, I realize how radical an idea this can be, to really take seriously this objective of creating this sense of wonder. And I think if each of you think about your own life, you can probably think of examples where your excitement, adventure, anticipation, your sense of wonder has been dampened, has been pushed down. Maybe even someone has laughed at your dreams, not taken you seriously. And that's a shame. And maybe the part of that is the culture around us. I don't know if you've heard of this idea of the crabs in the bucket. You put crabs in the bucket, and the one that wants to climb out gets pulled back, always being pulled back by the others. And it's a mentality that keeps you stuck where you are and in the present, because it takes risk and it takes some real commitment to get out of that environment. So this is not easy, what we're asking you to do. And so we really have to be clear-minded about what is pulling us into the future, whether you're with an organization or you're working on your own with a community. Is it project-oriented ideas? Are we being pulled by funding opportunities or the hope of growing in some particular way? Or are we being pulled by a vision, something that's bigger than you, something that is even beyond your reach? Sometimes we call it blue sky thinking. And so, yeah, we just really want you to not only yourself be captivated by a sense of wonder, by a sense of what's possible, but also be able to transmit that to your community, to other leaders. So thanks for listening today. Look forward to being with you very soon.